Welcome to the Friday afternoon series of webinars for we go from a codependent lens. So Debbie McRae is here today and she has a topic for us, but I want to announce, because we're in November, the time changes shortly. This is the one webinar that changes time. So this one, after the time change, will change to the live version at 1:30 Pacific time. And so it will be noted correctly on our website. Also, we will not have one next week, which is the 10th of November, but Matt will be joining on the 17th. So pay attention to the schedule, and we do have some alterations, over the next few weeks, and particularly with Thanksgiving as well. So that's my PSA. So without further ado, Debbie, what do you got for us today?
Hi, I am so happy to be here because I've got, I think, a very exciting topic today, one that shows up in my office quite frequently, and I think a lot of betrayed partners can relate to it. I do encourage you, type in questions, even if it doesn't relate to the topic I'm talking about today. So I'm going to give you two scenarios that have showed up in my office. And I see this kind of repeatedly, so I'm just making kind of a general example. So I have a betrayed partner who comes in, and repeatedly there's just no empathy coming from their addict partner. And they're so frustrated. And then they'll come in and say, I know what the problem is. My husband is a narcissist. He's never going to get better. So that's one scenario. I've had an addict partner come in and say, I'm here to see you because I have a porn addiction and my wife has told me I'm a narcissist. And so I've been reading on it. And, she's right. I think I am. So today we're going to talk about the connection between sex addiction, which is going to be the umbrella term I'm going to use today for porn and sex addiction, any sexual acting out behavior that is compulsive, and narcissism. So you're going to hear me talk a lot about narcissistic traits. So I'm going to focus on that. So oftentimes when I talk about narcissism in this webinar, I want you to think narcissistic traits. I will designate it when it's actually a personality disorder. Okay, so let's do a simple definition of narcissism. It describes somebody who is self-centered. Their personality traits are that way. Their personality style is that way. Typically, if somebody has high levels of narcissism, they are really preoccupied with themselves. They matter more than anybody else. They focus on their own needs and often at the expense of the betrayed partner. Now, I want you to understand that narcissism is on a spectrum. So at one end, we have what I call healthy narcissism. We have to have some self-love, and it's got to be in balance and in check because we need to have that empathy and self-awareness. But at the other end, the extreme end, that's where we have the narcissistic personality disorder. And we can fall anywhere along that spectrum. So it's really important to recognize that people move up and down on that spectrum. So I'm going to give you some additional behaviors that might indicate that you as an addict partner or as a betrayed partner, your addict partner, may be on that higher end of the spectrum. So we're going to go over about 14 ones. So the first one is you see that they have to be the best, the most right, and the most competent. I have seen this show up in a couple of ways. One of them is the addict partner who goes to group and says, you know what, I'm at the top of my group. I am the quickest worker. I get it. All the guys turn to me. I am the best, right? So that is so frustrating to the betrayed partner. Next one, number two. They constantly need attention and validation from others. So their get up and go, their drive for doing recovery may be dependent on outside validation as opposed to that internal validation and self-awareness, which we'll talk about later. They may need to have everything be perfect. So that's number three. So they believe that not only should they be perfect, everybody else should be perfect. Events should turn out like they want, and it should play out like you envision it. So I am the addict partner, and I've given myself 6 months to get over my addiction, and I'm going to do it perfectly. And when I get to the end of that 6 months, everything's going to be good. So that would be an example of that. Number four, they want and demand to be in control. So there's a sense of entitlement. what I see in this is their logic takes over. So the addict will think a certain way, and that's how it is. So you've got to be aware of the fact that this is very controlling. They control the situation. So if I'm a betrayed partner, I go to my addict partner, I'm trying to share something with them. They go logical. They tell me the facts, and here's how it is. They have all the control. Okay, next one, number 5. They never want to be responsible unless everything goes their way. So they place blame and responsibility on their betrayed partner, on everybody else. Could be their therapist, it could be their group members, their sponsor, because remember, we talked about they have to be perfect. So it's tied into that. They lack boundaries, number 6. And this means that, they think everybody feels the same way they do. They don't, care about other people's feelings, because what's important is how they think and they feel in the moment. Okay, the next one, number 7, they have very little ability to empathize with others, and they lack an understanding of the nature of feelings. It's really interesting that a narcissist or those with high levels of narcissism really, really struggle with empathy. That is the number one thing. That and control. Those are 2 strong indicators with that lack of self-awareness that somebody's higher on that narcissism spectrum. Okay, number 9. I think I'm on number 8. Sorry. Narcissists perceive everything as a threat. So they see their betrayed partner coming to them, wanting to discuss concerns, wanting to work together on something that's difficult, having that hard conversation, and they see the betrayed partner as a threat. So they are very adversarial whenever their betrayed partner comes to them. Okay, now we're on number 9. Their personality can be split into good and bad. So as long as everything goes their way, then they're great. But anytime it doesn't, then they're going to blame it on somebody else. This is the betrayed partner who comes into me and says, I never know what he's going to wake up like. I never know how he's going to be when he comes home. I never know what mood he's going to be in. And I do see that this often correlates with how well they are doing recovery. If they're having slips, they're not reporting them to their betrayed partners, then that bad part of the addict comes out. If they're moving into recovery and I'm making that shift out of some of those narcissistic traits, then you're going to see that good part of them show up more frequently. Okay, number 10, they are afraid of being ridiculed, rejected, or wrong. So if there's going to be an argument, they're always going to be right. We talked a little bit about that earlier. They always typically deal with with anxiety. And so they might project it out onto their betrayed partner. They might accuse them of being negative or unsupportive because they have so much anxiety. The next is they harbor a lot of shame. There's just so much shame, and they often bury their insecurities, their fears, and those traits they don't like about themselves. It's kind of buried deep underneath that shame. Okay, next one. They truly can't love or connect emotionally with other people because of that inability to have empathy and to understand their own feelings. So betrayed partners will feel this lack of connection. They might just sense that, there's not a connection, my partner's not getting it, and so they feel very alone. And the last one is oftentimes they don't have the capacity or the motivation to communicate or work as a team with a betrayed partner. So there's a struggle. I can't get him to work with me or her to work with me. And so I feel like as a betrayed partner, I'm pursuing them and trying to get them to do their work. So those are how some of those narcissistic traits show up when somebody has a sex addiction. So it's true. There is a link between narcissism and sex addiction. So a large number of sex and porn addicts display high levels of narcissistic traits. It can make treatment really difficult at times, especially when they are stuck in that denial phase. There's no self-awareness, and they decline and they won't acknowledge, their part. their roles, that they play in the situation. They are self-absorbed. They play the victim. And they did an interesting study in the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy. And what they did was they took 3 different types of assessments for narcissistic personality disorder and high levels of narcissism, and they administered these 3 tests. They did it to a group that did not have an addiction. They did it with a group that had pornography addictions, either in the past or current. What they found was those that were of the control group had normal levels of narcissism. Those that had watched pornography in the past year, but not currently, had a significantly higher amount of narcissism than the control group. And then those that were currently watching pornography had very, very high narcissistic traits. So it's very interesting. They have discovered through some very, very clear assessments that are that this is a situation that does occur. So what are we looking at, and how do we know where my partner's at? A couple things you need to understand. One is that sometimes we have somebody who is an addict and they can be a narcissist. We also have the addict who can just be an addict, and we have a narcissist who can just be a narcissist. So it is a little confusing at times. So how do I know? Well, if they've got high levels of narcissism, they need validation from outside. They need other people to validate them. So the validation comes from outside them to in them. If they are an addict, they're seeking validation by moving into their addictive behaviors, whether it's drugs, sex, alcohol, pornography. So there's a different focus. And so that's why oftentimes the betrayed partner will come in and feel like the addict partner is a narcissist. So in the early days of addiction recovery, the sex addict is going to show different symptoms. Here's what we're going to see. We're going to see that they're self-centered in the beginning. We're going to see that they ignored the betrayed partner's needs and they have no empathy. But we see a shift and a change. It may not be as fast as the betrayed partner would like it to be, but we see progress. They become less self-centered, more aware of the betrayed partner's needs. They might even reach out and ask what they can do. And they start to step into empathy, even though it might be very awkward and they may not do it very well. Now, if somebody has a sex addiction and they're narcissistic, what you're going to see is they typically don't want to seek help, or they resist it to a great degree. If they do seek help, then they're very lax in their recovery efforts. It's like they don't do it on a consistent basis. They might not really even try. They're going through the motions. The next indicator is you just don't see them exhibit any real initiative to work through their recovery. So they stall or they stop. And again, remember, along with that, they've got all those other narcissistic traits that I've talked to you about earlier. Sometimes there comes a point in an addict's recovery that if they have a very qualified therapist, the therapist should be able to recognize that they may have something more than just the narcissistic traits that can be connected to sex addiction. And they should be able to line up and help the addict partner find a psychologist who can actually do the actual testing and the assessments. As a therapist, I don't have people come in and I don't diagnose them as a narcissist. It's not within my skill set, and it does require that you seek somebody who understands the testing for this. So it's really important that you have, as an addict partner, a very straightforward, honest, direct therapist. Okay, so if you're an addict partner and a betrayed partner, there's some questions to consider. So as you see them in recovery, do you see the addict partners separate themselves from a group after being in recovery for a while? So it might be, I'm different than every one of the guys in my group. My addiction isn't as bad. I can just work my program on my own. That would be one way it would show up. They might say, I've made so much more progress than the other people in my group. So, it's only going to take me 3 months to get through what typically is maybe a year and a half program. I've actually seen that occur. Okay. The next question to consider: does the addict partner still seem to possess a sense of entitlement, impaired empathy, and an unwillingness to help the betrayed partner in their recovery? So, what this looks like is criticism of how the betrayed partner might be safety seeking. It might be lots of gaslighting. It could be difficulty regulating when the addict partner is in a difficult conversation with the betrayed partner. So be very, very aware of that. And of course, that lack of empathy. The next one is, does the addict partner, when they share emotional things, like feel empathy? Do they feel genuine remorse? Or does it just feel like, they don't really care about the pain that they've caused? So they have a very lax attitude. It feels very empty. So they go through and they might say things like, I'm sorry you feel that way. I had one betrayed partner come in and say, I try to go get empathy, and my addict partner goes, and feels like that's empathy. It's not. That is not understanding, that emotional type of sharing that empathy requires. Next question. Does the addict partner feel that others couldn't possibly relate to their own recovery experience because he or she is different? So it would be the guy that says, the guys in the group just don't get me. It's just a waste of time. I can't connect with anybody in my group. They're all weird. I've heard all those things, reported because they feel like, they don't relate to the recovery work that the addict with high levels of narcissism has. They might say to their betrayed partner, you just don't get it. You don't understand. I'm not as bad as the others, and I don't need, and then they'll tell you what they don't need. I don't need to do this. I don't need to do that. And then the last question, does your relationship with the addict partner still feel distant, even though they've been in recovery for a while? There's still that disconnection. And so you're not seeing the addict partner able to connect it yet. So anyway, what can the addict partner do? So let's talk about how the addict partner can kind of step in, and as they're working their recovery, they will see those narcissistic traits begin to go down on the continuum towards that healthier level of narcissism. So the first part is the addict partner needs to have awareness. So with this awareness, there's got to be a lot of self-reflection. This is key to recovery. That's why I like the 12 steps that people do, because it really takes you into that self-awareness piece, and it takes you into that self-reflection part of recovery. So part of that is that the addict partner has to acknowledge the effects that their behavior has had on the betrayed partner. They've got to work to understand the feelings and the needs of the betrayed partner, and they're going to explore new, healthier ways and means of getting your needs met. So that's part of it, that awareness. To me, that's really key, because as an addict, the attitude needs to be, I'm checking in every day and several times a day to see what's going on internally for me. And I need to know if my behaviors are recovery behaviors or my behaviors are not recovery behaviors. Okay. The next thing that the addict partner needs to do to reduce those narcissistic traits is they have to commit to long-term ongoing support, and they have to make a choice. This is a choice. I've been really hitting the idea of we get to make a choice. And so we get to choose recovery. So that means that recovery is looked at like a journey. It's going to be 3 to 5 years. So you're going to be doing some really good, heavy work during those 3 to 5 years. It's not linear. It's not if I do this, and this, then I'm healed. I can go from point A to point Z, 6 months, I'm going to be great. You've got to understand that it is a journey. The addict partner has to learn to practice mindfulness, self-care, along with that self-awareness that I talked about, and it needs to be done on a regular basis. So this means that the addict partner is going to listen to their betrayed partner when they have concerns. When they turn to their sponsor, they're going to take that advice and that support from their sponsor to heart. It means that when they go to group, they're going to ask the group to help them. And it's really important that they do that. The other one is that if you have somebody come to you and say that, you know what, you're really not doing the work you need to be doing, like your therapist, then you need to kind of check in and look at my self-awareness. I find that addicts struggle when they're not doing that self-care mindfulness piece. So it's directly correlated to struggling, in recovery. The next one is you've got to seek treatment from a qualified sex addiction therapist. Now, I'm going to tell you some challenges that I see show up for the addict partner. Lots of times they don't see the therapist on a consistent basis. They stop because they feel like I'm doing so good. I'm in my recovery. I am just, I only need to see my therapist maybe once every other month. And believe me, you need to be in that therapist's office, especially a therapist that provides that safe and non-judgmental space, that environment, so you can learn to experience emotions, and that you need to be challenged by that therapist, because in recovery, the addict partner has to go deeper. We've got to go into our shame. So choose a therapist that does shame work, and also someone who is specializes in trauma treatment, that they have the tools, the therapeutic tools necessary to help work on the underlying trauma of that addiction that you have. Hey, you want a therapist who will help you learn coping strategies. They will assist you when you have triggers, when you have cravings. So they are there for accountability. They are there to help you problem solve. They are there to meet the specific need that you have when you're struggling your addiction. So you need to use them. You need to have an attitude as an addict partner that you're in therapy for you. You're not in therapy for your betrayed partner. You're not in therapy for anybody but you. And it will shift and change, because now the focus is going to be inward on me as opposed to outward on how my betrayed partner is doing. You need to have a therapist, like I said, that can really help you with that lack of self-awareness. If you know you struggle with that, go in and ask your therapist to help you with that. If you struggle with shame, go in and ask your therapist to work with you on that. So your therapist is there also to help you develop the skill set of empathy. Empathy is something that takes several years to learn until it's organic. What do I mean by organic? I mean that all of a sudden when a situation comes up, the addict doesn't have to really think about what the words that I say, where I can step in her shoes and look at life through her lenses. No, they automatically go into knowing how that partner feels, because they can start to relate to it because they've been working on understanding emotions. That's a very, very important part of recovery. And again, like I said earlier, if you're an addict and you're still struggling with lots of narcissistic traits, then ask your therapist to help you find a psychologist who can help you with some more assessments. Okay. The next thing the addict partner needs to do is find an ongoing recovery and support group. You need a sense of community and validation. You need practical advice. You need resources. So it's important that you have, again, I love the accountability piece of having an ongoing group. So you want to make sure that you seek out a qualified support group. You want that support group to focus on your recovery from sex or porn addiction. You don't want it to be like, if it's, like Sex Addicts Anonymous, you don't want it to be a time where you come together and talk negative about the betrayed partners. And I've mentioned that in another webinar, that I've actually had that happen, with betrayed partners coming in and telling me that their partners have actually gotten worse and their narcissistic traits have increased after going to a meeting where the focus is not on their recovery. So again, you go to a group because it's going to help you focus on developing awareness, on developing empathy. Okay, the next one, create a support network, not just with your therapist, not just with your group, but find your circle of support. That's what I call it. I've mentioned this before. Find a friend that is there for you. So call them and ask them, when I'm struggling, can I call you? You might have a couple of them. They could be your accountability partner. You want to add your sponsor to that group. You might want to have the friend that when you're really discouraged and they're the type of person that can have empathy and help you start to kind of get back on track. You might have that friend that when you're really frustrated, you go to, and they're very logical and they can help you understand what's going on and connect the dots. So it's really, really important that you have that circle of support. And again, I cannot stress enough healthy coping mechanisms. You have to be aware of if something you're doing isn't working on a repeated basis, you probably need to look at it, use your self-awareness, go to your therapist, and kind of dissect it and figure out what is not working. You've got to do the deeper work on your your shame and your abandonment. That's just so necessary. And again, this is once you're well into recovery. Those are the things you're going to start working on. And then lastly, which I think is so important, is the addict partner has to make amends at some point. They have to take accountability for the harm that they've caused the betrayed partner. That's why I like the therapeutic formal disclosure process, because it's one step in doing that. Okay, just a couple more things. They've got to engage in activities that promote self-esteem and self-worth. So exercises and sports, creative pursuits, volunteering, those types of things, rather than turning to the addiction. You have to have a holistic approach. So as an addict partner, you need to look at, am I supporting myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally? So we're not just focusing on one thing, we're focusing on a full spectrum of things. So those are some ideas on narcissistic traits and is there a connection to sex addiction, which there is. Now, my betrayed partners will come in with very little hope. And I have to remind them oftentimes, we go back and we see the progress that their partner has made. And I validate that, yes, this is what you're experiencing, but we're going to see them move out of it. So hopefully this is helpful. Like, I try to bring things into the webinar that you can relate to some degree, whether you're the addict partner or the betrayed partner.
Which answered the first question, because it said, I'm the addict partner, should I be here? And I was like, yes, hopefully you're listening and gaining stuff. I of course have, multi pages of notes, and I've got some things highlighted. So always great information. But when you talked about a specialized professional to diagnose, I want to tag on to that, because I get all the time, and I know you do too, like you started with, is like, I am a narcissist. I am, whatever it is, I have ADHD, whatever it is. I'm like, have you been diagnosed? Well, no, and so it's, and as you have indicated, it requires a special training. Even within that, having someone who understands addiction and those specialized things is really key. So the guys that come to our residential program, I'd say about 15% of them have something where the clinical team identifies, or they've been told that along the way. So there's a recommendation for working with a qualified professional who understands addiction and those things to get a real diagnosis. That's helpful. It's like a medical condition, knowing what you got, then you can, get the appropriate treatment, for those things. Or, even some things, having the partner understand, borderline personality disorder or bipolar or something. It's really important to understand it. So sorry, I've talked way too much today.
Well, I'll add something really quick while you're catching your breath. It's really important, if you do have that diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, you're going to want to make sure you find a therapist who specializes in that or has a lot of knowledge in that, because it's really, really important, because you're going to be doing a lot of work on that letting go of control piece, that empathy piece, that self-awareness piece. And so make sure that you find someone who understands the connection of how narcissistic personality disorder, the diagnosable condition, does intertwine and, work with sex addiction. So thanks for that reminder, Tammy.
Well, and I really appreciate when you said, sorry you feel that way, because that is one of the most dismissive ways to sound like you're sort of showing empathy, but it's really, I'm sorry you're feeling way. I'm not taking any responsibility. I'm sorry that my behavior has upset you. I'm sorry, that whatever. It's like, I'm sorry you feel that way, is like, that is, that is the most dismissive way you can sort of say something that has a thread of sounding like empathy, but it has zero empathy. The terminally unique, you mentioned, I'm so different. I mean, I get people that come or that call about treatment too, that are like, I'm so different and special and unique and whatever. And my case is the worst or the best or whatever. I mean, whatever it is, it's always at the very ends of whatever spectrum. So either there's so horrible that there's no hope, or, I don't really think I need this because I'm so different. My case is different, so that, can be a challenge. Like when you talked about the input from a therapist or, somebody who, a peer, support or a sponsor that's going like, hey, I think you're struggling. My husband, and I've shared this before, I've been in recovery for a while, but my husband is very brave. And I've learned, I know he's always saying it from a very, I love you standpoint, because my first reaction is always, I want to, but he has said, maybe a meeting would be good for you, and I've learned to shut my mouth and go, maybe it would, rather than going, what, I mean, I wanted to react. So being willing to know that these people care about me and are looking for me, and they're seeing something that I'm missing in that moment. And if I did more internal reflection, I'd probably see it too. But if I just go to a meeting, I'll get
Yeah, I
some
want
help.
to add to that. I want to add
Yeah.
to that. The fact that you don't go into that reaction, right? Which could be a shame response or shame reaction, rather. That's what I would call it. Everybody's shame shows up differently. We feel it differently in our body. We go into different behaviors. It's really important as you're doing shame work that you recognize how it shows up for you. For some people, it might show up as a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. So what does that look like? What do I do? We have to understand and dissect that in order to heal the shame. So we're aware of it. And so we can use our new skills and tools, to get out of the shame. So I love how you just in your mind know that you've kind of reframed it to, I know he's doing this because he loves me. And then your shame goes away and you kind of step into that idea that he gives you. So
yes, yeah. And guess what? Things get better. At some point I have to be, I can I can be happy, or I can be right, or I can be happy. And, so I can go down to the mat, trying to defend some position that can be completely inane and stupid, or I can go, I want to be living a life in serenity. I want to have, I want to have congruent relationships. I want to be connected in real and meaningful ways. So therefore, sometimes I'm, super gluing my lips and going, okay, good idea. And it helps. So, uh, I kind of laughed because I have shared a lot in 12 step too. It's like, people, come and they get all this help and it's so amazing. And then they quit and then they relapse and then they come back and they go, I don't know what happened. And I'm like, well, it's the only thing where I go, oh, this is working really good for me. So therefore I'm going to stop doing those things. Those patterns, like, I really believe that my addiction is still waiting. So I have a daily reprieve. Today I'm going to do what I need to do, so that I live a day in recovery and I'm not making a huge mess of my life. And, it's just so much easier to do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
The attitude, in therapy, I get a lot of these too, rather than focus on me. How do I help her? How do I help her heal? And how do I, get all this? And, it's always pretty early in the process. And I'm going, the thing you can do to help is work on you. Don't shift the focus off of you and doing your work and get that foundation for you, because that's just a distraction. I get to not work on me. I'm going to do all of these things. I'm going to, and they're surface things. So it really is, if I do the work, if I show up and do the work on me, things get different. And then we got some questions. So, I really appreciate it. And it answers one of the questions too. Empathy takes time, several years to be organic. And again, I know partners are going, no, but I'm like, they're in preschool, on the empathy scale. We've got none, all of those traits that Debbie's talking about that's living in addiction on some level of that spectrum. So we can learn, but we have to learn, and it's going to sound fake and rote and all of those things and awkward, and then we're going to learn and we're going to go, oh, okay, so it's a journey, and we're not going to be able to do, I always say, the college dissertation on empathy, when we're in preschool. So we have to learn the steps to do that. So if you can, as Debbie said, see progress, if you can kind of take a snapshot and go, okay, here's where we're at right now, and like 2 months ago it was there, and I do see a little bits of progress. Okay, I can hope that in 2 more months I'm going to see a little bit more. But when unfortunately, and partners think this too, that if he just stops, and I'm using he and she, but if he just stops the acting out, then all of a sudden he's going to be this amazing human being. We have a lot of growing up to do. We have a lot of work to do on ourselves. The good news is that gives us the opportunity. It's an obstacle and an opportunity. We have the ability, just like you were saying, we can choose to do the work, that changes everything in a good way for us if we get out of our own ways and get out of our fear. So, okay, that's enough for now. So, I'm the betrayed partner. Discovery was 2 months ago. We are very stuck. Couples counselor has recommended that we stop with her until we are ready for the next step. I've requested disclosure. Will disclosure help us move forward? My husband believes I only want disclosure as punishment and more content to use against him, although he has agreed to participate in disclosure. I feel that we have been in a similar truth if I receive disclosure, and I will have more clarity on what I need next.
Okay, if you were my client, and this is how I've been trained, couples therapy in the early stages of discovery does not typically go well, because the betrayed partner is in crisis. The addict partner really isn't in their own recovery. So typically I might see a couple, they come in with the issue, and then my recommendation is each of you need to get your own CSAT so that for the next few months, you, the addict partner, can work with your CSAT on getting your routine recovery going, understanding your addiction, and working with you on disclosure. There are workbooks that you work out of in order to prepare for disclosure. You're having to try to connect again as often as you can to prefrontal, right? And bring up memories and make a narrative, and it takes some time. So you need to be regulated. When we go into couples therapy too early, you're just dysregulated all the time. So it's like, we're stirring the pot of emotions and you're leaving there and not feeling regulated at all. For the betrayed partner, it's the same thing. You've got to get through crisis. You've got to have the tools so you've got a wider window of tolerance, meaning you can handle more stress before you go limbic. You need somebody who's there to help you create your own recovery routine. And you also need to work through disclosure. So there's preparation steps that my clients go through for disclosure, including things like questions to ask, which takes a few sessions, not the whole session, but part of it, and even their impact letter. We work on that. And then if you've got CSATs who know how to do disclosure, then they're going to do a step-by-step process to take you through it. The only reason I would not recommend a betrayed partner do a disclosure is if they're planning on divorcing the addict partner. I feel like that they're going to use that information possibly against their addict partner. I do have some clients, though, that say, I need to know everything so I can make the choice of whether I stay or whether I go. So the overall goal of disclosure is not punishment for the addict partner. It's not to use the content against him. It is basically, like you said, it's for clarity for the betrayed partner so that you can sit and hear the hard stuff, hear the truth, regulate, and then you have that data and information to know how you're going to proceed with your recovery. For the addict partner, there's a lot of benefit from disclosure. They're not only recalling the things that they've done, so it will help with accountability, but they're also pushing through denial. Yeah, I did do this. If you've got a good therapist that challenges you, they're going to go, hey, you need to tell me more about that because that's a pretty big thing. You just brushed over that in one sentence. So they're having to really face their addiction, and they're also having to push through their shame because not only am I sharing this with my therapist, who I've never shared this with anybody before, now I'm going to go in with my betrayed partner and my betrayed partner's therapist, and I'm going to read this, and there's going to be witnesses. And it is such a great exercise and such a great tool in helping the addict heal and helping the betrayed partner heal. I don't see couples therapy being effective if you're there for treatment of betrayal trauma due to sex addiction and you're there to recover from sex addiction. I like to have disclosure done first. I like the couple to be regulated individually. And then what I do is I do a combination of, let's get you into a couples therapist, a CSAT. We make sure everybody signs releases of information so we can communicate. So you let and allow me as your therapist to talk to your partner's therapist, your couples therapist. And then we have you go to couples therapy maybe a couple times, and you come in for individual therapy. Or you may go to individual therapy a couple times, go into couples. Eventually, I will have my partner phase out and do a lot more couples, and basically just come in and see me when all of a sudden they're going, hey, things are kind of falling apart. I need help. So that would be my answer. Hopefully you can have him listen to this and understand. But how he's what he's saying to you is fairly common. I've heard it.
Well, and I don't hear that he's ready. Discovery was 2 months ago. He doesn't have the preparation to be able to do a good disclosure. And that means that he's able to, compile things. Because the other aspect that Debbie was kind of alluding to too is the coupleship is the client if you're doing couples therapy, neither of you. So it's different work, and each of you deserves and needs different kinds of help, an individual. So having him work with somebody who can actually help him prepare for this, and show up, otherwise, what I hear is, I want to have more clarity on what I need, and have a similar truth. My fear for you right now is you will not get truth. You will get what he's able to come up with, and it'll be half-hearted at best. And so that is, that's not a useful disclosure, because neither of you is going to feel good about that. It's not going to help either of you. It's just going to be, oh, we checked off that box, so getting, there was a study, and it was like 92% of people who did a good disclosure, even though it was difficult, both people felt good about it. And as Debbie was talking about, you're moving through this process. You're not stuck. But doing, and we unfortunately hear about the people who withheld something or didn't, well, if she hears this, she's gonna leave me. So out of fear, held off the things that, the partner really needed to know, and she finds out, and then, the whole thing blows up again. But having him get the help so he can show up and do it for real and not do a half job, with it. That would be, in my opinion, more me. What is your goal with this? Because if your goal is that you're going to have the truth, you won't until he's ready, and I think you can kind of take your temperature, more clarity on what you need next. You deserve support, and help for healthy boundaries, etc. We just had a betrayed partner work group start yesterday. And like it sounds like another great group of people, but Angela's supporting them, and it'll be healthy boundaries and all of those things. It's a really good psychoeducation. It's not therapy or treatment, but that's a great supplement to the work that you do with a therapist too. If you need help finding a qualified therapist in your area, email me, Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com. Tell me where you're located, and I will do my best to help you find the right fit. So, okay. The next question, like I said, I think you've answered it. There's a rough timeline, but yes, please do.
Let me add just something to this empathy. And why does it take so long? Remember, an addict, when they're in their addiction, works deep inside the brain, the limbic region, right? Where we don't process things the same. You can't have empathy when you are in that part of your brain. So we're having to rewire the brain to prefrontal cortex, that executive functioning part of the brain. So that's why it takes time, and the timeline is so long. Like I said, they can start to learn and have stronger neural pathways that'll take them to prefrontal with empathy. But when it's organic, they've fully rewired the brain. So now they're operating all the time out of prefrontal cortex. So I thought that would be kind of an interesting piece to add.
No, I'm glad you did. And I want to say all the time, and then there'll be moments where we go, you know, we're too hungry, angry, lonely, tired, we're whatever, you know. So we'd like to say that we're all the time, you know, full of empathy and we do a great job. And then there's the reality. So we're still human beings. So okay. How do I find the right qualified professional? I found it very difficult to find someone who specifically specializes in sex and porn addiction. It seems to me like porn addiction isn't taken seriously in a lot of spaces. Was diagnosed with ADHD last year, so I also need someone who understands it. Again, I will put it in the chat so you can see it too. Email me, tell me where you're located. I can help you because I know I'm not exaggerating, thousands of therapists around the world and would be happy to help you find someone who could be a fit for you. So, Tim.
Let me talk about the ADHD very briefly. This is an issue I see show up in session. And so you want to make sure that you've got a professional that understands ADHD. There's a great book called The ADHD Effect on Marriage. That would be very, very helpful and to understand the information there, because there's different types of ADHD. And yes, it does make it, there's challenges in addiction recovery when you have ADHD.
One more thing I'm going to put in the chat. So, Dr. I've got Troy Love and Todd Love. I have to get it right. Dr. Todd Love did a webinar on the Super Saturday Recovery Summit, and he talked about ADHD. And I literally about fell out of my chair because he talked about for males, the life expectancy of someone with ADHD is, I think, I haven't watched it in a while, I think shortened by like 13 years, and women it's 11 years. So getting help and treatment for that is critically important. But you know, as we said earlier too, making sure that you have professionals that, you know, can address. And I do know, I mean, I pay attention when somebody's looking for somebody that has, you know, something like ADHD. Please know that it's very common. It's one of those correlations like, you know, if you smoke, you're more likely to get cancer, but it doesn't mean you automatically will. And again, with addiction, you're not automatically going to be ADHD, but there's a higher correlation with ADHD and addiction, you know, kind of across the board. So it is more common. There's also a podcast. I forgot about that. There's a podcast with Dr. Todd Love, you know, and Dr. Rob on sex, love, and addiction too, if you want to listen to it. But you know, his webinar was really insightful. He did a lot of research on that aspect. So, you know, and he gets addiction. He's a CSAT trained therapist too. So, okay, next question. I'm really triggered as a betrayed partner. My husband told his supervisor today that he's not in a room alone with female because a boundary he has agreed to with his wife. Instead, I would have liked him to leave me out of the conversation and say he doesn't do it because he wants to be a man of integrity. Am I overreacting? This is the same supervisor who asked to give him a hug one day when he was late because of problems at home, and he let her give him a side hug. Ugh.
Okay. I really noticed the her. That's the part. And I'm seeing couple things there. First of all, it must feel for you like your partner is putting boundaries into place because he's just doing what you want him to do. So somehow he's trying to make you happy. He may not even agree with the boundary. And so therefore, there's a higher incidence of him breaking that boundary. What I prefer is the addict partner come to you with his boundaries that are part of his recovery. So it'd be nice if he came to you and said, I've made a decision that I will never be alone with another woman in a room unless you're by my side. That's a great way to do it. But the way he went in there and spoke, for me as a therapist, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, do we have somebody who's a victim? You know, I've got to check on that and see, you know, what's happening there. Do I have somebody that doesn't, you know, really want to be in recovery fully? So I'm going to check on that. And I'm also going to assess and check on, you know, their attitudes about their betrayed partner and educate them to understand what betrayal does, the symptoms that partners have, and what the needs that they have as well. So I would be very, very frustrated. And yes, I would not want him to include me in as the betrayed partner in conversations because he's doing something only because you want him to. that would feel almost a little bit like a betrayal. You're going into your therapist and you're talking in a way, in a passive aggressive way, negatively about me, the betrayed partner. And so that's hard. You're not overreacting. The other issue I have is the side hug. I don't believe, especially when you have somebody who's got sex addiction, that touch like that, even though it's a side hug, is something that they should be doing. Remember, an addict doesn't understand boundaries, and that's part of their issue. And so they need to learn as part of their recovery to say, no, thank you. Appreciate the offer, but no, I don't hug. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's a challenging thing as a betrayed partner. I might, if you guys are regulated and if you do check-ins or if you can create an opportunity to have a discussion, I think you need to talk about what kind of boundaries he has with his therapist.
This
And
is a supervisor.
oh, the supervisor. Oh, sorry.
It's a work related. Yes.
That's right. It's work
I
related.
know.
Oh, sorry.
I know.
You're right.
That's okay.
You're right. That's even worse. The
I
supervisor.
know. That's what I was thinking too. I mean, a
Okay.
therapist would be bad. Like, we're not minimizing that, but this is a
Yeah.
work situation.
Well, okay. So I, as a betrayed partner, would want him to change supervisors. I would want him to find a supervisor that would challenge him a little more on how he's coming in and phrasing, the boundaries and making you in a passive aggressive way responsible. If the person is a really good supervisor, they would do that automatically. That's part of their purpose for being there. And again, a supervisor should understand boundaries. They really should. And
Well,
one of
yeah,
them,
because I'm thinking this could be an HR. I mean, this could be an HR issue for the supervisor to be, even side hugging because if it's a supervisor, a hierarchy in a company is you are above this person in a hashtag Me Too world. That could be inappropriate behavior. So I have concerns about the supervisor as well. But I thought, wow, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't think I am on this, but to me, I was like, so he's going to his work colleague, his supervisor, and saying, "Oh, my wife doesn't want me to do that," which is minimizing and dismissive of my wife. Look how crazy she is. Like, she doesn't even want me to do, any of these things. It feels really dismissive of any feelings, that a partner, would have. So anyway, that was my
and now his work doesn't feel safe for the betrayed partner.
yes.
There's so many levels there of, where the betrayed partner is going to be concerned.
Yes. So we are both validating. You're right. That was a crappy way to handle it. And it would be worth bringing up in, if you guys are seeing a couples therapist, that would be really good to bring up in couples therapy, about that. Because yes, there's, a different job might be in order.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next question is, my PA seems to think it's okay to watch women as long as he doesn't take second looks. He has been in recovery for 24 years and 6 relapses and many second look slip-ups. He has 11 months of sobriety. I started the betrayed partner group yesterday. I thought I knew everything. Not true. Oh, Angela is excellent. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Anytime. So I don't know if this is all a continuation, but anytime a partner or an addict says, "Oh, they know everything," I know for sure that they do not. So even with a formal therapeutic disclosure, and Debbie can talk about this too, there's a process, because when something else is remembered, and it almost always is, then there's a process as part of the formal therapeutic disclosure to address that. So anytime anybody thinks, "Oh, we all know everything," I don't buy that at all. And I do agree, Angela is excellent. So, okay. But as far as the,
Let me go back to the one about the
yes,
second
please
look.
do. Yes, please do.
Somebody who's doing recovery and really is including their betrayed partner in that would be agreeable and establish the boundary that they don't do the second look. They don't even do, the first look. To me, that's rationalization. That is not true recovery. An addict needs to learn not to do that, because in my mind, the way I see it, it's objectification of a woman. So I'm looking them up and down. So they need to learn to put their eyes in, safe places. And if you as a betrayed partner need that for safety, then you have a right to that. And so you can set a boundary around that as well. And so you might want to go back to your therapist and work on, how do I talk to my partner about it, about the boundaries that I'm going to put in place around this.
Yeah, and yes, 6 relapses that you know of, but if he's struggling that much to get it, we have a Sex Addiction 101 online work group that starts again on the 18th, and he can go, oh, I have 24 years of recovery, and I'm going like, yeah, 11 months of sobriety or abstinence maybe, but yeah, this is right back to square one. So I would double up, triple up, 90 meetings in 90 days on 12 step, our online work group, like I said, the Sex Addiction 101 and Porn Addiction 101 both start again on the 18th. Solid foundational components, more accountability, more connection, good stuff to help, do that. So, but yeah, this feels like a really slippery slope because I'm giving myself permission, just a little, and then I'm going to look at some non-porn porn because, oh, I like that erotic material or whatever, we give ourselves permission. And then, Dr. Rob just said on the webinar on Monday night, he said, when the boulder starts at the top of the hill, you can catch it if it's early on, but once it's partway down, it's going to mow you over. And, that feels like where he's going. So,
and going into couples counseling with a therapist, I think that would be great too, because that therapist should be able to kind of support you and talk about some of the things we just said.
Yes. And then the last comment is a lovely one. The webinar has been absolutely amazing and informative. Thank you so much for the entire conversation. So please know, like the previously recorded webinars are on our website, and you will find a plethora of them. But Debbie's, like, I always have 4 pages of notes, and she does a great job with practical tools and things that I think you will find that is just one of the many resources. So we've got lots of free resources. Again, those online work groups, there's the foundational things, betrayed partners, Sex Addiction 101, Porn Addiction 101, and then the deeper work, the inner child, the attachment wounds, all of those things. But start at the foundation, and then once you've got that, then you can explore more of those wounds and traumas and things like that. But don't go, yeah, I want to check out my inner child first. No, you want to not get triggered and relapse. So anyway, Debbie, great to see you. So not next week, Matt will be here in 2 weeks, and then Debbie will be back the first week of December. So okay, can you believe it already? So,
I can't.
but yeah, thank you so much. Great content. Thanks everybody for the great questions.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.